total life changes. Please do me a favor, get on your feet and give the warmest welcome ever to Miss Shelly Thomas. Thank you.
Total life changers. Get up. Who's going to be the top CBD salesperson and team up in here? It's going to take that type of enthusiasm because this is a hot and crowded market. And I'm so excited for you guys to have the opportunity to be a part of this $800 billion plus industry. And it's room for all of us to get a piece of the pie. And most importantly, to go out there and help our neighbors, help our family members, because they're depending upon you guys to bring credible products out there and to help them understand why this plant is so powerful. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. My organization is My Healthcare Partner. It's a functional medicine organization. Has anybody ever heard of functional medicine? So I get a lot of questions all the time. It's like, I've heard of that, but I don't know what it is. Is it holistic medicine? What functional medicine is the way we treat root cause disease. It's the way providers are taught to get at why we have illnesses, why we have symptoms. So you may remember back in the 90s, everybody was so hyped about genomics coming out. And then it came out and it was like, great, now what? What do we do with all this information? We see you've got all these genetic SNPs. Functional medicine found a way, a system, to help practitioners be able to go in and determine why you may be type 2 diabetic and why you may be. Because if your diabetes is caused by stress, but yours is caused by sedentary lifestyle, well, guess what? The treatment shouldn't be the same, right? And that's the case for everything, whether it's cancer, whether it's autoimmune diseases, and these are epidemic. And so the reason I went into functional medicine as a coach is because of my ikigai. Has anybody ever heard of ikigai? Ikigai is a Japanese term. It became kind of popular with the blue zones. I know we have a blue zone in Fort Worth. So some of you guys are probably familiar with the concept of blue zones. Blue zones were, it was basically a research project started by National Geographic about 10 years ago, where they went around the world to determine what qualities, what are the characteristics of communities where people typically live well past 100 without disability and they're still thriving. Blue zones, don't ever forget that because it's powerful. It's the science of longevity. And so with that came this concept of ikigai because the number one community where people were still thriving was in Okinawa, Japan. Ikigai is the concept of what gets you up in the morning when everything else is going wrong, when you don't feel well, when you're stressed out, when you're really challenged in different respects. What is that nexus between your passion, your mission, your calling that really gets you up? I came to functional medicine after 3 years of very, very contemplative prayer and meditation, saying, God, what am I supposed to be doing? What is my assignment? Because I know you didn't put me here for what I'm doing now. And largely, this is my ikigai. God told me, you need to go out and you need to teach people how to have balance. And I was like, got it. Oh, crap, I don't have balance. I don't know what to do with that. And it was real because I was so out of balance. Most of us in Western society, we get rewarded for production, right? We get rewarded for performance. I'm no different. I grew up in a home that was very much academically driven. You want me to switch out? I grew up in a home that was driven by academics, lots of Ivy Leaguers and, just all of that stuff that society says is important. But after practicing law for 10 years and then deciding I was going to do pharmaceutical sales because their quality of life looked a lot better than mine. I'm just being candid. They were enjoying things like, dinners with providers and, just things that from the outside looking in looked really, really exciting. And I'm over here trying to free people trying to, keep people off death row and retrieve, prevent families from being broken up. Very, very stressful lifestyle. I went to pharmaceuticals, and I found that really there was just as much stress there. I mean, that's the reality of it. I enjoyed, though, working with providers. I loved working on disease management. And I was the person that they would call behind the scenes and say, hey, there's a new product out. Come teach me. Come teach me. I've got a patient who's got asthma, and we've done everything. We don't know what else to do. So I was the science end of that relationship in a lot of respects. But all of that caught up with me over time, because our bodies are not built to be machines. It's one thing to be productive. It's another thing not to know how to have balance. Okay? So largely, my ikigai had to come back to my son. He's my only child. He's my joy. This is my son and I in 2016 in South Africa, which was something that I manifested after being disabled and unable to walk in 2015. And I say that, yeah, and all of that is relevant to what you guys are going to be doing, because it's about the people. It's about the people you're called to serve. In 2015, after probably 10 years of living in what I believe to be our dream home, my body, my vascular system, and otherwise began to break down. And this was a long journey. We've been going from doctor to doctor, from East Coast to West Coast, taking my son, primarily, because as parents, what do? We take care of our kids first, and then we throw ourselves in there, which is really the inverse of the way it should be. We're supposed to put on our mask first so that we can save them. But intuitively, my son went from being in the Duke's Gifted and Talented program, one of the top 1%ers in math in the country in middle school. He was testing in graduate level in math when he got to high school. He went in 1 year of moving into that home, from that place and being on scholarship at one of our best high schools in Tulsa, to not even being able to talk and showing up on the autism spectrum. And so doped up on medication, which as a parent, you do what you think you have to do, right? If they tell you this is what you're supposed to do, you're going to do whatever you can to save your child's life. So largely, after going from doctor to doctor and not seeing any resolution, like most of us, you have to dig down deep inside and say, I've got to figure out how to save my child, right? And save myself in the process, because as a caregiver, any caregivers here? Lots of us are in that sandwich generation where we're caring for parents that are aging, and we may have a child that comes home a little bit sooner than we thought. Maybe they're trying to find their way, and that's the norm now. But that's a lot of pressure. Even if you don't recognize it, your body isn't necessarily built for that. And I didn't have the tools to be able to manage that. I didn't know that that was a state of imbalance in my chi and my energy. And that all of that, which is what we call cognitive dissonance, all of that trauma gets buried in your body. You don't just slough it off by going to the spa or by going to the gym. You have to really, really take some targeted efforts, very deliberate efforts, evidence-based practices to be able to get back to balance. So I said all that to say, in the process of trying to save my son and save myself, I met a woman who formulated CBD products. She too had a child that they wanted to diagnose the child as having leukemia. The child was having lesions. She woke up one morning, the child was in the kitchen floor unconscious. And she didn't want the child on medication. And she said, you know what? My grandmother taught me about plants, and I'm going to see what I can do to save my child. Fast forward, this has probably been at least 15 years. Her child's not had another lesion. Child has never had any type of relapse whatsoever. Yeah. This is real. These are the stories of what you're going to be actually hearing about, I'm sure, when you're out in the field talking about your CBD products. That's what brought me together, my team together, if you will, to go out and to be able to share our stories and support other families who needed this powerful plant. What you're looking at here is Dr. Mashula. Dr. Robert Meshulam is from Hebrew University, and he's what we regard as the godfather of medical cannabis. He's the first person to ever identify that we all, as mammals, have endocannabinoid systems in our body. Now, what's interesting about that, the endocannabinoid system is just like any other part of system in your body, whether it's circulatory, respiratory, neurological. Can you imagine having, for example, asthma or COPD or a brain injury, and your providers not being aware that you've got a neurological system or that you've got a respiratory system? How in the world can we treat the root cause of a disease process and we don't even know that there's a system that we're not addressing? It wasn't until 1984 that they discovered the endocannabinoid system. And that's what your products will be able to stimulate to get to the root cause of diseases for many of the people that you'll be serving. The reason that endocannabinoid system is so vital is because that's what keeps us at homeostasis. Homeostasis is what keeps us balanced. And so I say that very cautiously when I say you'll be out there talking to people who have disease processes. I say that with caution because everybody needs to maintain homeostasis, right? None of us, you guys are here because you're go-getters. You're here because you're successful. You're here because you're driven. But there's a cost to that, right? That means you got to do the extra work to make sure that you're showing up in a way that's healthy and representative of what you're bringing forth in your community. So I wanted to share with you just a little bit today about the science behind the endocannabinoid system, as well as a little bit about the therapy itself and using CBD and full spectrum products, and then give you an idea of the people that you'll be serving, the people who are called and waiting for you to come forth and support them in their efforts to get well. So I've got a couple of video clips that I wanted to share with you, and let's hear what Dr. Meshulam has said about the endocannabinoid system.
Of extreme interest, but not for the same diseases. I'm speaking now of the medical side alone. I'm not speaking of the recreational part. And in the medical side, there are diseases, there are disease states. The THC is more important than CBD. And there are other disease states where CBD is more important. For example, in autoimmune diseases, diseases in which the body attacks itself for various reasons, CBD seems to be much better than THC. For example, in diabetes type 1, it is a disease in which the body attacks the cells that produce insulin. And CBD, cannabidiol, is much more important than THC. In other disease states like trauma, it is apparently THC is more important.
So, Doc, what role do you see cannabis playing in upregulating the endocannabinoid system?
The endocannabinoid system is of extreme importance. On the health side, there was just a review recently by senior people at NIH, and they wrote that the endocannabinoid system is involved in essentially all human diseases. And that means also in states. And so obviously it's of extreme importance. Now, does it help situations which are not really clinical? Most of us are anxious at some point or another, or slightly depressed at one point or another. These are not clinical situations. These are situations of every day. And chances are that, yes, cannabidiol can affect that. Cannabidiol most definitely affects anxiety, most definitely helps with depression. So if it's extreme, then of course it's a disease. But many of these things are not extreme. And in this case, cannabidiol.
Potential for the endocannabinoid system.
What we're actually finding is that in incredibly wide variety of pathologic states that the dysregulation of the endocannabinoid system is implicated. So if you're taking a look at CNS diseases, so certain neurodegenerative diseases, we're finding that the endocannabinoid system could be a therapeutic target, all the way from neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's to mood disorders like depression or anxiety to even schizophrenia. You're finding that it looks like low levels of anandamide might actually be contributing to schizophrenia. And in fact, when you it appears that there's one human study where they actually gave CBD and it found that it was actually able to treat the psychosis of schizophrenia, and they believe that the mechanism is the CBD is boosting anandamide levels. We're also finding that the endocannabinoid system could be a therapeutic target for cardiovascular disorders, liver diseases, inflammatory bowel disorders, all the way to being implicated in obesity and diabetes, implicated in certain bone disorders like osteoporosis, and implicated in cancer as well as autoimmune disorders. And so you can see that targeting endocannabinoid system, it's a wide new area for drug development. And it's interesting that right now we don't really have many drugs that target the endocannabinoid system. Like we said, we have Marinol and we have Sativex. And actually there was a drug that was targeting the endocannabinoid system called Rimonabant. And it was designed to actually block the CB1 receptor, because the CB1 receptor, when stimulated, increases appetite and fat storage. And so it was designed to block the CB1 receptor, and it did work, right? It decreased appetite, and it led to weight loss, but it was pulled from the market because it found that it also significantly increased rates of depression and suicide. So this is a very complicated system, and we're actively trying to do targeted drug development, but we have to be very careful about how we approach it, as evidenced by the kind of case of Rimonabant.
Hello? Okay, good. So I wanted to share that with you for one reason and one reason only. I want you to understand what the thought leaders know. There's so much misinformation in the marketplace about medical cannabis, whether or not this is something that really is just a way to get recreational cannabis into our hands, whether it really has therapeutic benefits. What I want you to understand is that it's not a magic pill. In Western society, we're so used to taking a tablet and then your symptoms are resolved. But guess what? There's a cost to that, right? There's no medication out there, that, including aspirin and ibuprofen, that doesn't have serious side effects. What's important and what the advantage of this is that it's a plant-based medicine, which makes it perfect in and of itself. So you heard one of the practitioners from UCLA's cannabis research program talk about Sativan. These prescription medications that pharmaceutical companies have patented to use CBD in synthetic formulations. A couple of them have been natural, have been plant-based phytocannabinoids, but for the most part, they're synthetic. What did you also hear about those synthetic medications? Side effects. Right. They've not seen that with the natural phytocannabinoids like what you have available to you. Never have they ever seen any side effects, any suicidality, or any reason to put a stamp on this. This is important because as you're out in the field, you're going to get those questions, right? You're going to get them a lot. And what I want you to feel comfortable knowing is that you don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to go in and talk about the endocannabinoid system and the CB1 and CB2 receptor side, and this is what the ratio of this CBD to CBG to CBN to THC. You don't have to know all that, because guess what? Even the doctors really don't understand it fully. It's evolving so rapidly. Literally, I stay in this R&D area every day trying to keep up. But the important thing, and what you do need to know, is this, Now, this isn't proprietary. This is online at Leafly, which is a really credible source to begin to understand the whole disease process and so forth. How many disease processes up there would you guess that they've already identified as being treated, able to be treated with cannabis products? A lot, right? And the thing that's really interesting that you probably can't see, but in the inner circle, the middle circle, you'll see the different parts of the plants that are used to treat different disease processes. Why that's important is because you have a full spectrum product that you're able to market. Feel thankful for that. That's a blessing, quite honestly, because not everybody has full spectrum products. Lots of companies, just to be able to market them to people who are fearful of what phytocannabinoids may or may not represent, are out there touting themselves as having products that are strictly CBD or exclusively one particular strain. But the efficacy of this plant comes from being full spectrum. Anybody in the industry will tell you that whole plant medicine has what we call an entourage effect. So what we mean by that is for some disease processes, when you combine different parts of the plant, whether it's CBD, whether it's CBG, THC, instead of 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 2 begins to equal 200 and 400 in terms of their efficacy. And again, you don't need to, have all the details of whether that individual needs a CBC or what they need, because you've got a full spectrum product. You've got a full spectrum product that's exactly what the patients deserve and what you deserve. And so I just wanted to bring that home, that from the science and therapeutic perspective, you have everything that you need. And what you need is you need patient experience and stories like my own. So what I didn't share with you is that, again, as my son began to decline developmentally within a year, what I did was I partnered with this formulator, and she made a product specifically for his neurological needs. For the first time ever, my son says, I can feel motivation again. And my son doesn't like taking medication because he didn't like the way the prescription medications made him feel loopy. I mean, this is just real talk here. So for me to watch a child go from having such extreme anxiety, depression, neurological and cognitive impairments to the point where as a parent, I didn't know if my child was suicidal or not. There were days that literally I would walk in the home and I was afraid of what I would find because he was suffering. And because he was suffering, I was suffering. Even though I had to put on my suit and go out every day and put on a smile and try to be peppy and give the doctors what they needed in terms of what they deserved from me as a rep. I'll never forget one doctor said to me, you're only as happy as your saddest child. Blew me away because that was it. That was describing how I was functioning because he was suffering. But with the CBD, we turned the corner. I kid you not. He's now about 10 years past that. He's back in college. He had to sit out for a little while, but he's back in college. And he's gonna win. There's no doubt about that. We're gonna win this. And for myself, again, it did affect my vascular system. And technically, on paper, it should have taken me out. Literally, as I was driving across the state of Oklahoma for work, one day, I just out of nowhere had an extreme bout of fatigue that was so extreme, I didn't even have time to pull over to the side of the road before I had gone off the highway. Had I gone about 20 feet further, I would have gone over the overpass. And it was because of that that again led me to this root cause medicine to find out how do we get to the cause of what my ailments were, because conventional practitioners told me there's nothing wrong. But how many of you guys know that if you're in tune with your body, their labs may not pick up on it, but you know when something's amiss. And working with my functional medicine practitioner, including cannabis in the therapy, we were able to completely reverse the autoimmune diseases that she was able to identify that nobody else could. We were able to reduce the cancer cells that she picked up on within less than a year and a half with not a single dose of prescription medication. So we got a couple of more clips here. I want to be conscientious of the time so we can have some Q&A. But I want you guys to just hear about the patients.
THC and CBD in the practice of medicine.
Both compounds are of extreme interest, but not for the same diseases. I mean, I'm speaking now of the medical side alone. I'm not speaking of the recreational part. And in the medical side, there are diseases, there are disease states that THC is more important than CBD. And there are other disease states where CBD is more important. For example, in autoimmune diseases, diseases in which the body attacks itself for various reasons, CBD seems to be much better than THC. For example, in diabetes.
So, Doc, what do you see as the role for THC and CBD in the practice of medicine?
Both compounds are of extreme interest, but not for the same diseases. I mean,
like we're looping around, so I don't want to, take up your time by repeating that same interview. I do want you to know that this is the most important thing for you to take away from today. Now, you guys know from the promotions that I was in pharmaceuticals for about 20 years. And I was in the Hall of Fame for this for this one company. It's one of the top companies in the country. And whereas I knew my science, because you've got to be prepared, especially if you're addressing practitioners, this is the key to being successful in this space. You have to understand who's suffering, who needs your product, and be able to talk to them about their pain. Talk to them and listen, more importantly, to what's going on with them. Not because you're going in saying, I'm going to fix you, because that's not the intent here, because they need to be heard. They deserve to be heard, and nobody's listening to them up to this point. They're getting passed around from doctor to doctor, and even well-intentioned in their families and in their warm community. A lot of times people can't relate. So I want you to know the fastest growing population are your seniors that are using medical cannabis. So don't count anybody out. Don't assume that you know who this product may or may not be right for. Why do you think the seniors are using medical cannabis more so than a lot of populations? Anybody? Yeah. Yeah, all of that. We're living longer, and as we're living longer, naturally there's wear and tear on the body. Also, they didn't have the luxury of having root cause medicine, right? So just with age and continued care of whatever their ailments may be, now they're at a place where they're like, kind of like my formulator, we're going to go back to what we knew, plant medicine, right? How many of you guys have kids that play soccer or play football? Who'd have thought that most concussions among athletes occur with female soccer players? We now have brain scans, and we're actually moving to a point with my consulting group where we're going to be utilizing brain scans to help patients be able to recognize the efficacy of CBD or cannabis treatments so that they can see in the brain the actual effects of their therapy. The groups with concussions are probably our biggest, our loudest advocates. You have lots of retired NFL players who are out there saying, you'll just have to find me. You'll have to find me because I'm suffering with pain. I've got head injuries, and I need to be well. And guess what? We're hearing from them consistently that this is the only thing that's given them relief. And as it relates to chronic pain, in the clip you weren't able to see, providers know that this is the key to our opioid epidemic in the United States. That is the promise of cannabis, is that it will be used to bend the life trajectory curve, meaning that Over time, we've always moved up and to the right in terms of our life expectancy. For the first time ever, the life expectancy curve has bent and has gone down because of the opioid epidemic. So the medical community is really, really passionate about finding an answer, and this is what they're pointing toward. They're looking at medical cannabis, CBD products, things of that nature, because it allows them to taper back on the amount of narcotic medication that a patient requires to begin to get relief. Anybody know anybody with chronic pain? Yeah. I don't think you have to look far. And then we all know about the pediatric population. I mean, everybody, we saw the documentaries on CNN that brought life to all of these refugees. We call them medical refugees, who had to leave their homes and move to places like Colorado and California just so their kids could be able to get treatment. This is a natural treatment that they should have the right to use regardless. But we've got testimonials. We've got tons of research that shows with the proper phytocannabinoids, these kids are able to go from hundreds of seizures per week to being able to be seizure-free for months. This is the power of the opportunity you have. Yeah. So you guys get to be their heroes. Yeah. You'll see. This is really just a great feeling to be able to support people when no one else heard them. And you're not promising anything. You're just saying, let me help you. Let me see if I can provide something that might give you some relief. One thing I want you guys, before we open us up to Q&A, is to really think about this quote from Maya Angelou. And you guys have all heard it. It says, people will never remember what you said. They'll probably forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. That is your charge today. It's your charge to go out, to connect with people and connect where they're broken or where they need to be heard, where their pain is. Not to be the expert that knows every single thing about CBD products and phytocannabinoids. And for you to share your stories. Stories are what matters. When someone hears about another child who's had seizures and they're suffering because their baby is really in pain and having seizures, that matters more than CB1 and CB2 receptor size, right? And so what I'm really going to charge you guys with and encourage you to do is start using the product for yourself. Because your story, you won't have credibility without it, let's just be frank. Your story is what you want to be able to share, and it doesn't take a long time. It's not like it's going to take 90 days for you to begin to see the results. I will say that it's not always intuitive, though, because, again, it's a full spectrum product, and every person, we're all different. We all have different DNA, different chromosomes, different makeup. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get experience so that you can share that with your constituents on how to use it. There's a general rule of thumb that you start slow. You start low with low doses and you go slow. That's counterintuitive because what do we want? We want people to have a breakthrough. We want people to be like, oh my God, you saved my life. I was going to jump yesterday. That's not the way we want to use this medication. And principally, I'll be honest with you, the reason why they always say start low and go slow is because you never know how people are going to respond to different components of the plant, especially THC, because there's been so much hype around the euphoria of THC. And some people may respond to that in that respect and others not. But if we start low and go slow, like what your formulators have developed for you, you'll be safe. You'll be fine. And last but not least, under-promise and over-deliver. The product will work for itself. You don't have to make any, huge claims about this. But what you do need to do is be able to listen, be credible, and share your stories. So we've talked about this. One thing that's going to be available to you guys from being here this weekend is that I'm making myself available to you at a discounted rate to work with you on how to begin getting experience for yourself on using the product. Because there is, like any other medication, even though it's plant-based, there are dosing considerations. You've got topicals, you've got a systemic tincture. So do you know how to use it? Do you know how to get the best results? So I've offered $100 off on what's called a lifestyle assessment, so that you guys, if you feel like you want somebody to walk you through looking holistically at your health and well-being and how best to incorporate this therapy into your overall lifestyle modification plan, then I'll make myself available to you guys for that. And they'll be able to give you the discount code so that you'll be able to get that $100 off. But again, my intent for offering that to you is so that you have credibility. If you pick up the tincture, if you pick up a leaf, this one, and if you pick up Alleviate, I apologize, and you put it on because your knees are hurting at night, and you don't get the relief you're looking for, then guess what? It's going to be really difficult for you to go out with a straight face and tell your mom or someone else that this is going to work for them. And they're going to want to know, how does it compare to, have you used any others? And, legitimate questions. But guess what? There's a way to do this, to layer this so that, and I can help you guys with that, so that you get the best efficacy. And therefore, you can actually go out and share with others how they can also be relieved. So I think right now we're just going to take a few minutes for Q&A. Evan, how long do we have?
We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So just real quick, before we start the Q&A, a little explanation about what she said with the coupon code. Tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, everyone in attendance will receive an SMS text message through the same number, the 810 number that you guys have been receiving the previous messages. There will be a shortened link in there and also the explanation of the coupon code. So if you decide to go through with that process, it will all be done through that SMS text message. So now let's open up for free question and answer. I know I saw one over here first, and then Martha, you want to take that one, and I'll go over here.
Hi. What are the? This is a big deal in the industry, and especially with patients, like people interested in, in the government employees. So, what are the possibilities of this product not appearing like not as a side effect, but more so in the drug test? Thank you.
Okay, sure.
But I have people that are wondering about that.
Yeah, so great question, and I think it's something that you guys need to feel comfortable with. Because it's a full spectrum product, there is the potential that it can show up in a drug test. Period. That's true for any full spectrum product on the marketplace. Now, why is that important for you guys to be comfortable with that? First of all, there's a lot of hype, again, that's misplaced around THC. But most importantly, you gotta understand the synergistic effect. I had a practitioner call me about a year ago and he says, I've got a product, what's your opinion? It has 0 THC. And I said to him, that's not a good thing. I completely respect what the intent is, because everybody wants to offer something that's safe. Nobody wants somebody to have a car accident because they're taking your product, right? And that there's some euphoria. That's not what THC does, and definitely not at the doses that you're providing. And they actually just released a report, I don't think it was from NIH, but it just came out this week, you can look for it, that talks about THC having more therapeutic benefits than CBD. That's why you need it in the product. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It's not one of those things where if you double the amount, you're going to get double efficacy. It's just the way the plant was intended to work. So, great question.
Hi. So, I get this question since the stuff has come out. Other companies have 500 and 750 dose milligram. I don't know. What is that different between theirs and ours?
So, again, the intention is to start low and go slow. But again, the way we're conditioned in Western medicine to think is that more is better. So it doesn't mean anything to the patient. What it means is, so your receptor sites are kind of like lakes. What you're trying to get to is that all your receptor sites throughout the body, on all your cells that are intended for the endocannabinoid system to be stimulated, that they're at a certain baseline. And once you get past that, your body is going to excrete what it doesn't need. So you can give them 500 milligrams, you can give them 1,500 milligrams. It's not how the body works with the endocannabinoid system. More is not necessarily better. And what I'll make available to you guys is kind of a journal of sorts. It's specifically for people who sell cannabis products. Because what's most important is the patient begins to journal any changes that they're experiencing, and that's what you're going to sell to. Because it's not, a lot of times it's a very subtle change, right? So somebody may come back and say, I didn't see any difference. But with the journal, you say, how are you sleeping? Oh, you know what? I did sleep 8 hours this time instead of 5 hours last week. Okay. How's your appetite been? So it's your responsibility to connect the dots for them, because this is bringing the body back to homeostasis, which is where it's intended to be. Does that help? Does that answer your question? Thank you.
That's kind of similar to the question that I had. Are there like recommended doses for the various illnesses that were listed on the chart earlier? Mm-hmm. And if so, how should it be monitored, or what kind of leadway would you say someone should have as far as how to monitor what they're doing as far as using the different products?
Mm-hmm. So if you were providing them, let's say, with a plant, a natural product, how would you suggest that they monitor the effects of that plant on their wellness? I mean, there are all kinds of plants out there, right? We use herbal teas, we use green teas, we use an abundance of natural products. How do you monitor when you say, you know what, green tea would be really good at boosting your immune system, for example? How would you tell that person to monitor that? Yeah, and I say that not to be flippant, so I hope you didn't take it that way. I'm saying that because you have to remember this is a plant. This is not a synthetic medication with drug interactions and black box warnings and things. That comes from making something that's artificial. It's hard for us to make that switch in Western medicine to think about what's natural. So there is really, I mean, there are recommended doses, but they're not established by the FDA. So I wouldn't want you to go out and begin to put yourself in that position where you're trying to be the, medical expert for that patient and say, you know what, I think you're going to need 500 micrograms of CBD. It's not at that point. The science isn't there yet. I will say that you will hear people talk about the 1-to-1 ratio of CBD to THC as being optimal for certain disease processes. So you've probably already heard that. But you still want to start slow. I don't care if that's the optimal dose or not. You have to work up to that. And what works for one person may not work for the other. So again, just follow that general rule of thumb. Every 3 to 4 days, they can titrate up and then monitor that. That's how you're going to be most successful and safest. That's the best thing you can do for the patients. Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of questions. Number one, is it 100% organic? And what plant-based is it? Because you hear a lot about CBD out of hemp or marijuana, or both.
Yeah.
What is it exactly that's in this product?
Is there anybody here that from the company that wants to speak to the organic nature of the product and the processing of it? I'm not privy to the processing. My understanding is it's fully organic, but I'm going to let them address that part of your question.
So,
and ma'am?
100% organic, hemp derived.
Yeah.
Hemp derived.
So hemp.
And then where is it grown?
State of Colorado.
Okay.
So let me answer one thing that you raised. So she raised the issue of hemp versus cannabis sativa. And the industry regards them as like cousins, if you will. Very similar. Each one has advantages and disadvantages that the other doesn't. And it really comes down to the hemp is really derived from the seed, and the cannabis sativa is from the stalk and from the leaves. Does that matter at the end of the day when you go out there in the marketplace? I mean, people may raise it because they've heard it, but at the end of the day, it's really about patient use. Anybody else?
Martha, got one more.
Yes. Today I had the wonderful experience of trying the Alleviate. Never used it before. And I saw an immediate effect on it. I've suffered with like, if your arch drops, it's a very painful thing. And I knew that was happening. It was irritated, so I put the ointment up there, and within minutes, the pain was gone, and it's still wonderful. Yeah. So we're going to have some great testimonies like that, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I also tried the drops. My concern is I did follow the instructions, a dropper full, but you know, we are novices at this. I mean, the majority of us are novices at this, and we want to make sure that we are making the right recommendations, and people who are educated on CBD oil will ask questions about dosages and recommendations. And basically what our box says, I think, is a dropper's full, which most times we think 8 drops is about what that might, you know, be the equivalent to the whatever, you know, see how novice I am? So all I'm saying is the guidelines as the recommendation, you say start with the lowest dosage. So are you saying don't recommend what is on the bottle?
Absolutely recommend what your formulators have decided.
And is that the lowest, or is
that's where they're going to begin?
That's a safe place for anybody to begin.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will tell you, so that's a great question, because systemically, this is what you want to take on a regular basis. You want your tincture in your body at all times. Topically, or for those that vape, or I don't think you guys have a vape product yet, those are what we call acute therapies, when you have breakthrough pain, or maybe you're having difficulty at nighttime getting to sleep and you need something in addition to your systemic treatment, for lack of a better word. So keep in mind there are some differences, which is why I've made myself available to kind of work with you guys, so that as you become more comfortable and familiar with it, you can share those best practices with the people you're serving.
Hi, I'm from Colorado, and I have a dog that has severe joint pain, and she's really, really old, and I pop her a pill every morning, and I would like to not to. Is it safe for my dog?
So, I don't know if it's been tested or not in animals for this particular product. Now, cannabis in general has been tested with children and with animals. So I have given, for example, I just lost 2 of my dogs. They were 15 years old, and because of the mold in our home, they became cancerous. I mean, that's just the nature of mold. They lived a good life, but again, toward the end, one of them lost her hearing. I gave her cannabis drops. Invariably, her hearing would be fine with the cannabis. This is the truth. If I left it up to my son and my brother to administer it and they forgot, then her hearing would go away. So, I mean, I've got a lot of experience anecdotally, which is what you guys want to, you know, why you want to get that out there so that you can hear about how it works. It has been studied in animals. I can't say that this product has. And to the pain you spoke to, plantar fasciitis probably, you know, that reminded me of something I wanted to share with you. So I had, even though we had remediated my home and got rid of the mold, it's very, very difficult to get to mold. It's very persistent. So it started coming back a few years later. And I'm like the canary in the mine. If there's any toxicity, my body will know it before anybody else. So I started having severe pain again. This was December a year ago. My pain was around a 9, at least a 9 on a 10-point pain scale. Within a week of starting on CBD product that I had available to me, my pain was down to no more than a 2, a 1 to 2. It blew me away. I didn't expect that because I had not been using it. I had been saving it for my son because it was custom made for him, and in some respects for me, that was sacred. That was for my son's brain injury, and I wanted to give him every opportunity to be successful. But I was in such severe pain to the point that I was unable to walk that I said, I'm gonna try it myself. And I did, and I've never turned back since.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up one more time for Miss Shelly Thomas. Great, awesome presentation. Okay, so just confirmed with her in front of everyone. You see how we do that? Miss Shelly Thomas will actually be out in the lobby atrium area for any of those questions that we unfortunately weren't able to answer. But in order to stay on track so we can get to that Boots and Bling party tonight, we got to continue rolling on with this. So we are going to have another 10-minute break. DJ AV, I know it's going to be, can we just get some music so we can wake everyone up, everyone start dancing? So we'll be back here in 10 minutes with Jason L. Scott.